down to Biscayne.
Yikes. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the flow playing, got an all band. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
Welcome back to 5 on the Floor. I'm your host, Greg Sylvander. Today's floor plan, we're going to recap the Miami Heat's 120-117 victory over the San Antonio Spurs in the preseason. With me to do so, we have Digital Adel. What's up? We are going to dive into this game. It was a matchup that actually we got to see a majority of the regulars play. So I think that that's something that we can take from. So we're going to dive into that. Before we do any of that, though, you know I'm going to call out Off the Floor. That's where you need to go for all your Miami Heat talk. We have a bunch of different channels. You can talk NFL football, fantasy football, all kinds of different other channels like music. But the Heat main thing chat is what's basically the spot where you basically can talk Heat all day. You can bypass all of the political nonsense that you're finding on other social media apps right now. Come just for the Miami Heat talk. And that is on Off the Floor. That's our Discord. The link is right here in the description. Check it out. $2.99 a month. It is worth every penny. Come check out Off the Floor. And we're going to be adding more and more stuff there. We're going to be doing stage shows eventually, maybe even try to watch games. So subscribe now. We have a bunch of members, and we're trying to continue to grow that community. So do not forget about us there on Off the Floor. Also, want to tell you about a great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that is Prize Picks. You got to use the code 5. Because that gets you $50 instantly when you play your first $5. It's daily fantasy simplified. Basically, this is all you have to do. You choose your favorite players in your favorite sports. You choose more or less on their statistics, whichever ones that you feel most confident about. You can do flex plays, power plays, up to 6 plays in once. But you got to use the code 5 because that gets you $50 instantly right when you make your first $5 bet, which is easy to do. Use that code 5, prizepicks.com on your desktop, or download the app. Again, the code FIVE, PrizePicks, Daily Fantasy Simplified. All right, Adele. So the Miami Heat rolled out their starters. So did the Spurs, kind of, so that was good in terms of that. At least we got to see Chris Paul, Sohan, Barnes, Wemby. I don't know that the fifth guy that they had out there, Julian, I always get his last name. Champagny. Thank you. I don't know that he'll start when this all gets going here, but it was the regulars for the most part. And as I started to pull together notes in the first half of this game specifically, I thought the Heat were really the first unit, came out with a really good energy on defense. There was a lot of possessions where they got deflections off of passes. The guards were really into that. So as we kind of go through this episode, we're going to break this into 3 tiers because this is kind of how the game happened. There was the starters. There was the second unit, almost like hockey substitutions. And then there was the third unit that closed out the game, which was the younger players. So we'll get to them as well. But this first unit, Terry Rozier, Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, Nico Jovic, and Bam Adebayo. I thought that it was a really good, not just for the guys that you expect to play well defensively, Jimmy and Bam, but guys like Terry and Tyler and Nico were getting in the passing lanes. That jumped out at me. I like that there still appears to be an emphasis on getting up a lot of 3-point shots if you're not at the basket. So that jumped out at me as well. There was plenty of space, almost to the point where there's a little bit of overpassing that took place at times. So that's why you play preseason games, to work through all of that. But ultimately, the Terry Bam connection, I think, is going to be a key one throughout this season. So as I continue to see those lobs go up and Bam bring them down, I think that that's a key takeaway. But Adele, from your perspective, when we watched the first unit, up against most of San Antonio's best players as well. What were your key takeaways from the starting five that we think will ultimately be there on opening night?
Absolutely, man. I mean, one of the big takeaways I have are the same thing that you have is the energy level and activity on defense. Really love to see that. I mean, Bam was locked in against Wemby. Wemby's a freak. I mean, he's able to hit threes with that huge wingspan, 7'5" or whatever he is, 7'4", can handle. And Bam was locking him up, man. He had him in jail a couple of times on the perimeter. I really like the defensive disposition and activity level. I charted deflections, right? So like whenever you're trying to gauge the activity level, don't look just at steals, but deflections. They had in that first quarter 7 deflections alone, and then they only had 2 in the second quarter. So you could see how high their activity level was when they were really locked in and engaged in that first quarter. What I really liked also about this unit is where people are going to get their shots. They're running a really vanilla 5-out offense right now. You're not seeing a lot of variations off their sets. But what I'm noticing, people are figuring out where they want to get their shots. Jason Terry, I did it again. Terry Rozier, he's actually starting to hit his spot in the corner, man. Terry in the corner is becoming a real thing.
Agreed.
Even off the dribble, he's beating people off the dribble and then stepping back into that corner three, and it's becoming a real thing. Bam off those hammer pin down screens, flare screens. He looks really good out of the corner shooting those threes. And the tempo. I know you don't game plan for preseason, but you could see there was a concerted effort in that first quarter to really push the pace so that you don't have to deal with Wemby directly head on under the basket. That's what I really took away from that first quarter, offensively and defensively. And there is a lot of space. And to a point that we made on the playback show, you're going to see in the regular season, in my opinion, Jimmy Butler get a lot more open baskets off of back cuts from this wide open lane that you're getting with that 5-out offense. And so you're going to get his availability, but he's going to get easier shots and it'll be less wear and tear on his body.
I think that's music to Heat fans' ears, to Heat brass's ears. Honestly, like, you know, you want Jimmy to be able to get as many easy buckets as possible because you know he's going to initiate contact at some point and he's going to the line and he will get hammered and fall down on the floor. So anytime that you can mitigate some of that, I think that that's a great point. Just to round out the starting five conversation, I initially started this game asking myself, how is Tyler Hero going to find that rhythm and that confidence and that swagger that Tyler Hero gets to playing off the ball so much? And I thought it was interesting to watch tonight because he ended up kind of finding it. As I'm looking here, he was 2 of 9 from 3. So that's not maybe the best night. 6 of 13 overall, though, 4 assists, no turnovers. I do think that this is going to be an interesting thing to watch with Tyler because I feel like he is a momentum player and that like when he is feeling good and he's feeling it, that good things tend to happen for him. But now he's going to have to get to that in a different fashion. What's your take on Tyler and just like, I guess the ignitability factor of him playing off ball? Am I reading into it too deeply, or you think that he's still going to be able to get into a groove playing off ball the way that he does?
Yeah, I think he'll be able to do that because he did it in Kentucky in college. Like he played off ball primarily. So it's not something that's foreign to him. But what you're seeing at the NBA level, his defense is going to lead to offense. And transition game, specifically in transition, is where he's going to be able to get rolling. You'll notice that he got a lot of his baskets coming downhill in the paint, in transition, or even in the half court where his 3-point shooting prowess, he's going to pump fake and be able to get into the lane. Again, that 5-out offense just makes it a lot easier once somebody actually gets out of position. Now you can attack that basket without the shot blocker roaming over. And so being historically that Terry Rozier and Tyler Hero are not as proficient at finishing in the paint, that open lane is going to help him be able to finish in the paint. And so his paint touches, I think, are going to lead to his momentum more than his just outright hitting threes and handling the ball all over the place.
That's an interesting point about the paint touches that I hadn't considered. A couple things as we wrap up, kind of talk on the starting five, because I felt like Jimmy did Jimmy things, Bam did Bam things. I mean, we don't really need to wax poetic much there. I think that we're in a good spot with those guys. But a few numbers that really jumped out to me: they had 31 assists on 40 made field goals. That is a good thing for all units, not just the starting unit. And also, they got up 45 3-point shots, which I think is something that this team is going to want to err on the side of 40-plus threes in most games. So it's good to see that as well, because I think that Spo's probably wanting them to be right at the rim or at the 3-point line, and he knows that they're going to get middies all day from certain guys. So you want to try to get as much of that offensive distribution as possible. So those were some things that jumped out. The other thing, though, was San Antonio out-rebounded Miami 50-36. Some of that may just be size, and also these units were weird, and we're going to talk about kind of the second unit and then the third unit, which almost were treated like hockey substitutions in this game. We didn't really see a lot of mixing and matching, which I think will be a point we get to after the break here about like how much should we really take from these other lineups that we're seeing, because I personally think that some of these guys are going to get integrated into the rotation, play with some of the starters, and it may look a little better. But for the sake of this particular game, we will talk through those different lineups that we saw. Before we do, going to tell you about another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that is Water Cleanup of Florida. Do you have a water leak and can't find where it's coming from? Dealing with water or mold damage, especially during hurricane season? This is for your home or business. Water Cleanup of Florida. They're at 954-579-0356. Call them for immediate assistance. Over 60 years of combined experience, Michael and his team can handle all types of leak detection issues, damage issues from storms, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. They've been up and down the East and West Coast helping out all these hurricane all the people that have been affected by the hurricane. It's been really cool to see. Follow them on Instagram. They also are at WCUFL.com, 954-579-0356. Call Michael anytime on his personal cell. Again, they've got over 70 now 5-star reviews on Google. Water Cleanup of Florida, 954-579-0356. If you have the schmutz, they got the guts. So the starters went out, and then it's the second unit of Drew Smith. Let me see if I can get it right here. Alec Burks, Duncan Robinson, K Love, and who am I missing?
Jaime,
thank you. And it had been Haywood Highsmith, who he seems to have gotten a night off tonight. That's going to be an interesting thing to watch, because they've got 11 guys that maybe you could find a functional role for them on this team, but I don't know how often. Maybe Spo will play 11. I don't know. Maybe early on he will. But the second unit was those 5 that I mentioned. Haywood Highsmith, again, didn't play. Drew Smith is not going away, folks, as much as that, I guess, at times can pain me to say, because I think some of the offense it's not fun to watch. I have to admit, he plays and competes on defense, and he definitely – and as much as I think both of us are fans of Isaiah Stevens, you see the size difference with him having to, D up guards and really press up on guys like Chris Paul or something like that. That's a tough matchup for anyone, but Drew Smith particularly has the size. He looked like he is getting more and more comfortable making defensive plays, making winning plays. And then the rest of the guys, I have to be honest with you. I think Duncan looks like he's in mid-season form. I don't think that there's anything to worry about with his back, and that was a big question coming into all this. Jaime still looks like he's trying to find his way. I feel like these lineups are not doing him a great service, but it's temporary. What were your thoughts on the second unit specifically, and the thought that Drew Smith may be the guy that's going to kind of ultimately get I guess you'd call him the backup point guard, but I don't really want to go there, because I have a feeling that they're going to find a way to maybe play with less of that kind of traditional player out on the court for long stretches. But what were your thoughts on the second unit specifically?
You hit the nail on the head when you called them hockey line changes, because that's exactly what it was. 1 5 goes on or is on, the other 5 goes off. And one big thing specifically about this offense, I think they really are leaning heavily into the analytics. The starting unit and the second unit, there's no mid-range shots. Like if you look at their shot chart, they're all threes from the corner, top of the key, and then right in the paint. So that second unit stuck right to that as well. And for Jaime, I found it interesting, as we spoke about previously, he had a hard time finding his spots. But I think in this game, he got to that low block and mid-post area way more than he did in the first game. He looked way more comfortable, was drawing fouls, getting assists, and looking more like his old self. And I think that's where he's going to be most effective, is going to be those cuts to the basket, posting up in that. You're definitely right about it looking more disjointed for him because Drew Smith isn't a natural facilitator. The offense just looks rough. The spacing looks clunky because Drew really isn't a high volume or high percentage 3-point shooter. So he's not going to really stretch the defense either. And he's not athletic enough to really finish inside. So you're put in a dilemma of where you're playing 4-on-5 offensively. So that makes it tough for Jaime. Now, where Drew makes up for that, like you said, his competitiveness defensively. He's always making winning plays. He doesn't turn the ball over. And he is just a pest, man. He will hound you from the time you step onto the court until the whistle blows. So I think he's definitely not going anywhere. Heat Nation needs to definitely, get used to that fact. Duncan Robinson, man, he's spicy, dude. I like his game, man. He's looks the best he ever has. Coming off a back injury, you can't ask for anything more than that. His 3-point shot, his balance is good. Even whenever he fakes people, has to like stutter a little bit, there is no hesitation. He can step right back into his 3. So I love that about Duncan's game. Thomas Bryant is just a backup big. I know not everybody's going to like it. I know my opinions specifically aren't always that high on him, but he's taking up minutes to get people rest. But ultimately, that's going to fall to K Love. I thought K Love actually looked really good tonight. I thought his 3-point shot looked really good tonight. And he's just a wily vet, man. He's going to get you the rebounds. He's going to play position defense, and he's going to move the ball. So I like what I saw out of that second unit.
I'll say that Kevin Love, Alec Burks are probably guys that are going to have some games where they play 25 minutes and other games where they play 5 minutes. It's going to be one of those situations with those two guys, very situational, matchup dependent. I'm glad you brought up Jaquez again, because he actually, as I'm looking at it here, he had 15.6 rebounds, 5 assists, no turnovers. He was 5-11 from the field, 5 of 8 from the free throw line. That's really what you want to see from him, is getting to the line. So maybe I'm overstating a bit him getting to his spots. I've just felt like that second unit, it's just been a little clunky to watch. And maybe you're right about that. Drew Smith is the cause of that. And so you got to take the good with the bad there. I guess Spo is going to lean defense in that scenario. But as we close the book on this unit specifically, and then we're going to just get to the young guys quickly before we wrap, because I think the young guys are going to get a lot of opportunity in the game against Atlanta that we're going to see next this preseason, is that the big thing with this second unit is that I think that when you see them integrated with the starters and they're not just sticking to the hockey substitutions like we've been talking about, it may open up things for different guys, and these things may look a little different. So that's, if we're looking ahead for something in the regular season to monitor, to me, it's going to be the way that the rotation shakes out when it's not just a flat, straight up 5 guys going out there to replace another 5. So I'm interested to see that. Ultimately, though, they ended with some of the guys that Heat fans really want to see, Khalil Ware being one of them, Pele Larson. We've been wanting to see Isaiah Stevens. He got some run, as well as Josh Christopher and Keldon Johnson. That was kind of the closing group here. Again, Nasir Little, Zion Pullen, Haywood Highsmith didn't play. Jay Rich is still recovering from injury. And Warren Washington, nobody mentioned him yet, but he did not play as well here. I think he'll get funneled to the G League. But your thoughts on the the 6 or so minutes that those guys closed out there at the end. I know we want to see Isaiah Stevens in as many settings with good players because I really think he has great potential. I see the size issues with him. We mentioned that on playback, but I thought that he had his moments in tonight's game. All these guys had their ups and downs, but you have an interesting note on Josh Christopher that I think is worth sharing here too, when we're talking about how they're determining who's going to get these final two-way spots, but just your overall thoughts against the Spurs with this young group that we finally got to see. I said Keldon Johnson earlier, Kashad Johnson finally get out there and play with this Heat group.
Yeah, absolutely. So with this group, we'll call them the Summer League Championship group. I think that they kind of warmed up to the challenge. They weren't ready for it. So if you saw in the very beginning of the game when they first got in, the pressure that San Antonio was putting on them got to them a little bit. And they were getting turnovers and some deflections, and it wasn't looking great. A couple air balls were out there, but eventually they settled down. And so once they settled down, you got to see some of their traits and how well they play together specifically. Isaiah Stevens picked up a silly foul on a guy that was 6'10", shooting a fadeaway mid-range jumper. Yeah. You can't do that, especially when you have an uphill battle against Drew Smith as it is for a roster spot. But overall, I like the way the ball moved. I like the way they got after it defensively once they warmed up to it. And I like the way that Pelle Larsson is just such a physical guy defensively and offensively, but he also has that soft touch from three and is able to knock down threes. And Kashad Johnson also, once he got that air ball out of his system, knocked down his next opportunity off that hammer screen that the whole offense has been running. Now, when it comes to Josh Christopher, my thing is I don't know how he makes this roster. I know he has a two-way, but I could see a path where he doesn't make it for this reason. He needs a lot of on-ball usage. And he's got a lot of guys that play the same position he does. Technically, Jimmy Butler plays the position he does. Jaime Jaquez Jr. plays the position he does. Haywood Highsmith plays the position he does. Kashad Johnson technically could play the position that he does. There's just a lot of wings, and that's what he is. He's a big wing. He's not a point guard. So I just don't see the need for another one of those guys unless there's some catastrophic injuries. You know, I'm not saying this team has a history of that, but that's really the only way I could see them needing a guy with his skill set, because he needs the ball in his hands to be effective.
That's an interesting point. And honestly, before you said that tonight during playback when we were watching the game, and I wanted to make sure that we touched on it on the show tonight, is because it didn't really occur to me how much would have to go wrong for Josh Christopher to be put in the best position for Josh Christopher to excel. You know, like in that world where he's in that on-ball role, what the hell happened to this season? So it is an interesting thing to think about in terms of who they keep. Right now, he does have one of the two-way spots along with Drew Smith and Johnson and Kashad Johnson, but I don't know how that's going to work in terms of them funneling him to Sioux Falls. Feels kind of weird because he's like in this interesting part of his career where he's kind of, is he really going to go down to the G League? So I think he may start the season as one of the two-way guys, but you're right. I think that they may find that they need to address other things as the season goes. And so that is something that I think is worth watching. Final thoughts here. The Miami Heat win 120-117. Again, it's preseason. Bam was 2 of 3 from 3. I want to make sure I shout that out because we always want to keep pushing the Bam agenda whenever we can. But Adele, your final thoughts before we close out.
My final thoughts is I think this Heat team is going to be better than the fan base gave it credit for whenever the offseason was rolling along and everybody thought there had to be a move made. Jimmy Butler looked in great spirits. I mean, he looked happy to be here. He looked active. When him and Chris Paul got into it, he really livened up, and he even had a nice one-handed dunk, nice back cuts. I think this team's going to be in for a treat with this team if they can stay healthy. I like the defensive intensity they played with, the up tempo, and a big takeaway if you're looking at the analytics for people is that they've gotten away from the mid-range jumpers. Like they literally only had probably 6 or 7 out of both units, the starting and backup unit. Everything else, threes from the corner, which is the shortest 3 on the court, which means you're going to have higher percentages, or from the top of the key. They've really avoided those long wing threes that they used to traditionally shoot. So I think it's going to be interesting from that in that aspect of it. And I think you're going to see a lot more variations off of this 5-out offensive set. And I can't wait to see that in a regular season.
Yeah, with the regulars out there on a regular basis, I think that that's kind of the next step of this, the evolution of seeing this team come together. I do think it's going to be deeper and likely will probably win more games than people gave them credit for. But, you know, we're going to also note that it's early. But another thing that jumped out at me, they only had 9 turnovers tonight, and I went and looked. They're 4th in the league so far this preseason at 11.8 turnovers a game. So for them to be keeping turnovers down with all these different units out there playing, you know, you're really it's an interesting vibe. It seems like it's a team that's relatively connected at an early stage of the season. And so that's a really good thing. These are all things we'll continue to watch. And guess what? We get to watch them again tomorrow night. The Heat take on the Atlanta Hawks. That's the makeup game for when the Hurricane had this game rescheduled. So it's the Hawks and Heat in Miami. We will have you covered for that. Thank you to Adel. Thank you to our sponsors, Water Cleanup of Florida and Prize Picks. And we will have you covered for the Miami Heat against the Hawks tomorrow night. Thank you for joining us. Peace out.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.